Hi everyone, Tyrone Rail fan back with you once again with part 3 of our Pennsylvania reunion tour series. But before I go any further into that and what it encompasses, I wanted to say a few things. First off, you might notice that I'm not home right now. I'm actually at college for the fall, so that's keeping me busy. But I'm trying to stick to a every other Friday schedule for postings so I can balance my schoolwork and my video editing. So just expect videos out every other Friday for probably the next few months. I might start posting more often if I start to get overloaded in terms of footage. But the second thing and last thing I wanted to say is I noticed a couple of days ago that my Western Maryland scenic video was the first one on my channel to get over 100 views. So thank you all so much for that. I'm glad everybody enjoyed it, and hope you all enjoy this hour-long exodus as we take a tour of the middle division between Tyrone and Enola, Pennsylvania. Hope you enjoy. Our tour of the middle division began in Tyrone, where we specifically timed our arrival in order to see the Nittany Bald Eagle doing their switching work. The Nittany Bald Eagle is a short line railroad that operates about 70 miles of track in this part of the state, and they serve cities such as Tyrone, Lock Haven, Milesburg, Bellefonte, and State College. Today's power was a bit of a mishmash, with a 52-year-old GP38 and a 69-year-old ex-Chicago and Northwestern GP7R. I've left the technical information down in the description so as to save myself a little bit of trouble of reading it out. At first glance, I thought that ex-Conrail GP38 looked a bit out of place since it was lettered for a different railroad. But I found out later during my research that both the Nittany Bald Eagle and the North Shore Railroad were part of the same system. They, along with 4 other short lines in the state of Pennsylvania, make up the North Shore Railroad System, which is owned by the Susquehanna Economic Development Association and is operated under contract by a private company known as Roby Railroads. Information aside, the crew shoved back into the yard to pick up their train, and we scrambled up into town to find a spot to shoot them. Our landing spot would be at the intersection of Washington Avenue and West 13th Street in the parking lot of the Save-A-Lot Food Market, where the tracks run right up the middle of the street as they head out of town. Always cool. The crew took a little while to turn the train loose because I assumed they had to do a brake test, but soon enough they came up the hill with those 2 old EMDs grinding hard to get this little freight train out of town. Being a native Virginian, I found it interesting to see the merger partners for Norfolk Southern making an appearance on the train today. You see them a lot back at home, but I didn't think you'd see them very often up here. Nevertheless, it was pretty cool to see. With the Bald Eagle train in the wind, we resumed our eastward trek on the Middle Division. Our next stop was Huntingdon, where we set up at CP Hunt right next to the Amtrak station. That field in the bottom left is the former connection for the Huntingdon and Broad Top Mountain Railroad, which ran to Hopewell and abandoned in the early 1950s. Off to the right is the 121-year-old Hunt Tower, built in 1900. It's been out of service for quite a while now, but as far as I can see, it serves the city as the Chamber of Commerce building. From what I also heard, there used to be a museum on the second floor, but I don't think it's there anymore based on the brief research I did. Right next door to the old tower is the town's Amtrak station. Obviously not as glamorous as the Pennsylvania Railroad building behind it, it still serves its purpose, greeting passengers on and off the east and westbound Pennsylvanian every day. Ever since we had left the Nittany Bald Eagle at Tyrone, the rails had fallen silent. But that quickly changed right as we were packing up our equipment when the gates in downtown activated. From out of the west, it was 20T, an intermodal running from Kansas City to the GIA Intermodal Yard in Harrisburg. The plan was to move east to Mount Union after this train, but as is the nature of the Pittsburgh line, it caught us off guard again a few minutes later.
I would not stand there.
Have fun, Jackson.
Going the other way this time was 21J, a Rutherford, Pennsylvania to Chicago, Illinois rocket running every bit at track speed through Huntingdon. 21J, we made tracks for Mount Union. And once we got there, it wasn't long before the first train showed up. Mount Union was somewhat significant on the timetable during the Pennsylvania Railroad days because it served as the connection between the Pennsylvania Railroad's Middle Division and the famous East Broad Top Railroad in its heyday. The East Broad Top line is now out of service, although I believe there are still some old coal hoppers in the area on the EBT tracks around here. I wanted to go look for them, but we just straight up didn't have the time to. Not long after the oil train, up came another intermodal, 21E, running from Morrisville to Chicago and running every bit of track speed again through Mount Union. I would assume if they were running this fast, they probably overtook the oil train somewhere west of here. Sometime after the passage of 21E, we started hearing a C-42 calling signals to the east of here. I knew that was a local based on the C prefix, but at the time I didn't know where he was running to or from, and none of us knew that they would be carrying a consist straight out of the 1980s on the head end. Two low-nose GP38-2s still getting the job done on the main line in 2021. Next up at Mount Union was another westbound empty backhaul from Baltimore's Consol Energy plant, the 593. One thing I noticed when you come up here on the middle division is that you see these things way more often than you see the Carolina-bound coal trains back at home. We had noticed they were running a lot slower than everything else when the head end came by, and we were wondering what the story was right up to the moment they came to a dead stop. Our guess was that C-42 had stopped to work in industry back to the west and had the main line blocked. So they stopped here, but that didn't mean the action slowed down at all, because a few minutes later, up came eastbound intermodal 20Q. once this train started slowing down, we began to wonder if something else was up. Then we found out that 20Q was going to slow down and stop so 593's crew could check their end of train device, because apparently they had been having issues with it. With that goal in mind, we decided to leapfrog them up to the next town on the line, Mattawanna, and we set up at the old station track and waited on them.
Oh, here it comes.
With this 20Q in the wind, for now, we scooted on into Lewistown, where we found the westbound Pennsylvanian pulling out of the station headed for Huntingdon. once the Pennsylvanian was out of the station, Trevor and I made a discovery behind a shipping container. A set of old Pennsylvania Railroad color position light signals recently removed. These things served the Pennsylvania, Penn Central, Conrail, and NS faithfully for over 70 years, just being taken out within the last 2 or 3 years. I'm not sure why these ones are here, but considering the Lewistown Depot also doubles as a museum, hence why they rebuilt that tower off to the right that was embedded in the station building, I would think that they're either being stored here in preparation for a move to Altoona, or the Lewistown train depot is going to put them up themselves and have a little bit of an interactive display with them. I personally would be okay with either proposition.
Did you get me farting? Yes, I did.
My CPL daydreaming was cut short when another train lit up the airwaves headed east. This time it was another oil train, this one a run-through off the CP at Bensenville, Illinois, headed for Reybold, Delaware. As a quick note here, note the location of the crossover right in front of the Lewistown Depot platform. Not too much of a problem, I just find the placement interesting considering what's right next to it. With the oil train out of the way, I started to do some research on the short line Juniata Valley Railroad that runs behind the depot. And while I was doing that, westbound mixed freight 37A made its presence known at the platform. 237A, we scouted the Juniata Valley's engine shed, but found the roll-up door closed for the day, which was a sign that they weren't running. But while on our way out and back to the main road, we found a relic of the past being used as a tool house by the railroad. I don't know how long it's been here, but regardless of that, it's always cool to find relics of the old Pennsylvania Railroad where you least expect them. Once out of Lewistown, we picked up an eastbound that was calling signals behind us. But we weren't exactly sure where he was, so we just crossed our fingers and hoped our luck would work out. It was decided that we would stop in Mifflintown to shoot whatever this thing was once we found out we were ahead of him. And once we got into town, Daniel and I set up at the Pennsylvania Railroad station while everybody else went up on the hill across the tracks. There's a pedestrian tunnel that goes under, which is really cool. And we waited for the arrival of eastbound intermodal 22W with an old NS-9 doing the work. Mineral Brick Pennsylvania Railroad Depot was built in 1903. I believe it served trains up until the eve of Amtrak in 1971. A quick look at Dan West's excellent Pennsylvania train depot site says that the eastbound platforms were removed at some point, but that the pedestrian subway, which is that canopy behind the trailer cars, is still intact. Also, apparently there was a nearby interlocking tower here that was torn down sometime in the 80s, but I don't have any photos of that at the moment. I'll leave a link to the site in the description if you all would like to take a look at it, because it's a really cool source that has some really cool pictures. After 22W, we slid east into Duncannon, and we decided to forego the usual depot shot in favor of setting up at this stone arch bridge at the mouth of Sherman's Creek. The creek flows out into the Susquehanna River, which is just beyond the bridge here. In short order, up came our second 20Q, with a different consist than the first one we had seen back at Mattawanna. Not sure why they were running two of them, but honestly I didn't mind. We knew that a westbound was ready to go out of Enola, so I scooted over next to the fill that gave us a good look at CP Cannon headed the other way. And then we found out that 34A had a BNSF GE trailing last out. Cool.
Let's go to the Rockville Bridge.
In terms of where our last stop would be, the decision was almost unanimous, and we set up at Rockville Bridge just in time to see that 66R from earlier headed across the river into Harrisburg.
Somebody's coming off the road and goes to Harrisburg and Enola. This is back there. So we're gonna see the next one. It's probably 12R actually. God, that'd be awesome. Might be 227. That was cool.
After a brief dead period at the bridge, an old friend made his presence known as they came across the river. It was NS-12R, mixed freight from Columbia, South Carolina to right here at Enola, with his usual 60E trailing third out. The 60E is usually a dead giveaway as to what train it is because 12R and his counterpart 13R usually bounce power between the northeast and the southeast. An interesting thing I later found out was that Rockville Bridge, when built, originally carried 4 tracks. It stayed this way up until the 1980s when the PRR mainline was modernized and one of the tracks was removed. It remained 3 tracks up until the late 1990s when an intermodal container was blown off a train and into the river. And when the outermost track was removed, NS decided to reconfigure the entrances on either side to prevent containers ending up in the river again, although this has happened at least once since then. R's passage got a little more entertaining when we noticed that the tarp covering that loaded center beam car was blowing on the other side. It was a little breezy up there, and I can only assume that tarp got blown loose somewhere down south. Still pretty funny to see, though, along with those 2 Norfolk and Western hopper cars.
Coming?
It's coming. I can't do it as fast as Larry did it.
While we were driving up to the bridge, we passed a stopped eastbound intermodal that I assumed was waiting for clearance across the river. I was proven right when they showed up right as 12R's DPU was coming across, and I later realized that it was the same 20Q that we had shot all the way back at Mattawanna. The first one. Still not sure why they were running 2, but it provided a pretty interesting scene as both trains met on the bridge. While 20Q was getting clearance into town, 12R had stopped, I assume, to get clearance into Enola Yard and begin breaking his train up. They would sit there for a little bit, but honestly it didn't bother us much because we couldn't see it.
did another. I just fucked something else up too. I only had stored for 5 shots. Like 5 default. Is Carter coming back?
A little while later, 12R got underway and pushed into Enola Yard to begin breaking their train up for the night. With the evening sun setting quick on us, we decided to call it a night after 20Q. The next day would see us explore the city of Harrisburg a little more and then tackle the Lurgan branch as we pushed towards home. A certain engine would make that leg of the trip all the more worthwhile, as you'll see in the next video, which is coming very soon. Stay tuned.